Thank you for listening to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast. Visit guyswhodostuff.com. You probably shouldn't Google that.
All right, welcome to today's show. I am Joe. I have a new co-host joining me today, filling in, Adam Lee. Adam, say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. They can't respond back.
Talking to you, man.
I'm doing great. I'm thankful for you to come on the show and co-host with me. And today's guest, super excited to welcome Dave Bates from Wise Insights. Thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to talk to you. So we've met out at networking stuff, and sometimes if you go out to a networking thing, you do what's called like a one-on-one, if depending on whatever it is, and you get to grab coffee with somebody. And you and I spoke for quite some time, and I felt like I got a lot of free advice from you because that's kind of what you do, as well as some challenging and really good principles. And so excited to talk to you today. So tell me a little bit about, well, I guess this is where I want to start. I know a little bit about you from looking at your website and from meeting you that you were a senior executive for a while with a passion for helping leaders and helping people communicate well. What was the catalyst from you from being an executive for somebody else's company to saying, like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I have for a long time had this entrepreneurial bent. And I've kind of been out on my own before in a number of different capacities. This time was kind of a situation where, we'd been working together for a while, had a lot of really great stuff happening. But really, as we iterated our way into that business, it became kind of more and more apparent that the kind of things that were originally calling me into his business were not really necessary in the same way. And so it became just a better opportunity for the two of us to kind of go our different ways. And really the reason that I went there to begin with was to really help build the business, to bring operational, efficiencies to the business, to help look across the overall enterprise and see how we can grow.
Yeah.
So what I then said was, look, the reason that I came here was to do that. There's no reason I can't go out and help other people do that at the same time.
Yeah.
I can't do that as an employee somewhere, so I'll start my own thing.
So did you work yourself out of a job? Did that happen?
I don't know. Maybe.
My job's done. Great. Thank you.
I think it was really more about getting organizational clarity around what the business owner at that place wanted, and realizing that for me to be there was potentially more than they needed.
Yeah. So you said you kind of had an entrepreneurial bent. Did you started other companies before?
Well, starting other companies, I've experimented around a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I've been part of startups, and like one of my first experiences was when IBM decided that they were going to roll out our home networking and automation division. And that was back in the mid to late 90s. And so a lot of the things that we do today on our cell phones and with our Nest thermostats and all that kind of stuff, turning things up and down and accessing our house from somewhere else, that was stuff that we were doing way back in a lab in 1997, 1998. And so, I kind of got bit by the startup bug at that point.
Was it more the startup bug, or was it like the work? Because I'm always fascinated with like the Internet of Things. Like, and now it's so common that it's not cool anymore. But like when it was first starting, it was like, I can use my phone to unlock my door.
Well, it wasn't quite as cool back then. We used to use this big Nokia phone called the Communicator. You can Google it and find it somewhere in the Wayback Machine.
I'm gonna put a copy of it on the
We
show notes.
referred to that as the shoe phone. It was terrible.
It was called the Communicator.
It was the thing where you could send text messages. That was really cool new stuff.
Yeah.
And so what you'd do is you'd text your house to turn a light on or something like that. That was the theory that we were kind of working under.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes. It was both. Mm-hmm. It was the entrepreneurial stuff and it was the work. It was really cool stuff.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So now, when I am asked to introduce myself, I say, you know how so many people get the Sunday night blues when they think about going back to work on Monday? Well, my job is to help there be less of that. And that happens to business owners just as much as it does to employees.
Yeah.
A lot of times what we find is that a business owner has gotten themselves into a place where they're spending more time on the organizational and business aspects of it than the thing they started the business in the first place to do.
Yeah.
So for them, it's kind of like, wow, I'd really like to go write some code, or I'd really like to go on a consulting gig and, help somebody through their consulting problem. But I can't because I got to go hire this person, or I got to go write that policy, or I got to go do this other thing that's about building the company and not the reason they started the business in the first place.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really appreciated when I was hanging out with you for the first time is you helped me understand, because I think I'm like a lot of people in that I kind of know enough about what people's jobs and roles are. And so I had assumed, I think falsely before I had coffee with you, that a coach and a consultant was the same thing.
Yeah, they're really not. I think that the way I describe it is coaching in its sort of original form is this aspirational thing. It's a question of where do you want to be, and how are you going to get there? So it's aspirational in that, like we're asking the person who is being coached, like, what are you feeling about where you are today? And how does it compare to where you want to be in the future? And the difference between that and consulting is that consulting is typically fairly prescriptive. You're not going to go to McKinsey or Deloitte or Accenture and say, here's where I want to be, right? They're going to say, well, if you want to go from point A to point B, here's a series of 18 steps in order to get there, or 5 steps to get there. Yeah. So the difference between aspirational coaching and prescriptive consulting is that one person is driving. I mean, the customer is always driving, right? But one is where we're using knowledge and expertise to tell you what we think based on our observation of so many patterns in so many other places, versus just sort of helping a person explore kind of the ideas and places that they might want to be.
Right. So have you ever met with a client has it ever been like, oh, they think they need consulting, but they really need coaching?
Well, I think a lot of times people want somebody to tell them, just tell me what to do, right? Because a lot of times that's just easier.
It's a lot easier than
give me the plan,
thinking about what to do.
Yeah, and it's really, really hard work, right? To sort of be, you hear about this with writer's block, right? People sit down and they're like, I got a blank page. What do I put on it? Well, coaching is about like helping you see what to put on the blank page, right? It's in your head somewhere and there's noise in there. And the goal is like, if I could just talk to somebody who has a framework for asking really good questions that help me think about the noise in my head and pick the thing that's a signal instead of a noise, and then get it out of my head. And so a lot of times, people often actually need a blend in this thing that I kind of jokingly referred to as Coach-sulting.
Yeah.
A true certified coach will be they go to pains to not tell you what to do or what they think. Have to ask for permission to, like, can I just share something that occurs to me here based on what you're saying? And the idea,
is that like a coaching rule, like a big no-no they teach you in coaching?
It's not a no-no. It's a best practice. It fits into the ICF professional coaching competencies, and it's part of how you get certified as a certified coach.
The ICF is what does that stand for?
It's the International Coaching Federation.
And so what does that look like? Like when I'm out networking and I meet somebody and they're a coach, I assume that is there discrepancies? Are there like coaches that just say they're coaches and they're like life coaches and they just tell you that you look pretty and you're great? And then there's like coaches that are, I see it. Like I imagine that guy from SNL. What was the line? I can't remember the line that he would always say. Like, you're worth it. Gosh darn it, you're worth it. That guy.
Inspirational.
You're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it.
That guy. I could do that. I could be that.
You did better.
But the people, is it something that you would caution people, like you really want to work with somebody that's licensed by the ICF? Because this is what the difference is?
Yeah, so ICF doesn't actually it doesn't license people. It's not a licensing board like your CPAs or the bar or anything like that. But it is sort of a recognition of a given set of competencies. It's kind of like the project management certification and those kinds of things. So your original question was like, is there a caution around that? I think you can be a coach. So coaching is a posture. It's a set of skills that are oriented around you and where you're at, and how can I help you kind of identify what's next and what could go wrong, what things you could try. And by having that conversation with you, I kind of hope to help you discover a new path forward. And you don't have to have a certification to be able to have a posture. Right. So what the certification does is it gives you confidence as a client that you're going to get somebody who has been independently sort of audited for a body of knowledge. If that's important to you, then you should go find an ICF certified coach.
Yeah.
But if it's not, I don't know that it's a prerequisite.
Listening to you kind of describe what you do, my thought was really anybody that has that vision and wants to stay on track needs somebody like you in their corner. Do you find that most people that reach out to you have kind of hit a wall and maybe their business is floundering and they kind of reach out to you to help them just pick things back up? Or what percentage actually, find somebody like you from the get-go that says, I know I can get distracted. Yeah. I know other things can come up, but I need someone to help me kind of stick with my vision versus, hey, I'm getting close to bankruptcy. Yeah. I need a guru to come in and take care of this and fix it.
So I recently read that people who consider themselves gurus really aren't. That's a term that
the love guru, that guy, Mike Myers. Yeah.
So, but it really depends on. So I'm a consultant. I got to say it depends, right? I can't take a position on anything. I'm just kidding. I think it depends on sort of the person's willingness to be humble and ask for insight and input and really be willing to take it.
Yeah.
And I think it's less about the condition in which they are. So some people will just start out like, hey, I know what I don't know. Who can I find that can help me? And that's kind of gets into some of the other nuances between consultants and contractors, right? Like, hey, I'm not really good at this. I need somebody to just go do this stuff for me. That, like hire somebody to do that.
Right.
And so if somebody's business is in a shambles, for one reason or another, it's great if they have the openness and willingness to admit, hey, I've kind of put this thing into the ditch and I need some help getting it out. But again, it's not.
Probably helps save time. You don't have to spend like a month convincing them that you put this thing in the ditch and you need some help.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Actually, when you're in that spot, it doesn't usually work very well. And I think the number one indicator of success for a coaching client is humility. I mean, coaches call that coachability, but really, coachability is kind of one of those jargony words. And the reality is that if you're humble enough to be able to say, I need some insight from somebody that isn't me.
Yeah.
And submit yourself sort of to the process and trust the process, you'll get a lot more out of it than you will if you're just like, hey, I need somebody to tell me how great I am.
That was kind of, go ahead.
Yeah, you've got to hit that all the time. Like with guys that think they can leave whatever job they were doing to start their own thing, they've got to think that they have a little bit more vision than most people. So I'm sure, what percentage of people do you like come in contact with where you're just like, you guys are not listening, you're not absorbing, I cannot help you? I'm sure that's a no-no in your business, but it's got to be.
Well, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And there's two things. One thing I've learned a lot about recently is this idea of really exploring empathy. A person is absolutely right in their own mind based on the experiences that they've had to think the way that they do. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means that they're right in their mind. And so when we talk about somebody who is, fairly successful, that is difficult for them. And a lot of people who, let's say they've been in business for 10, 15, 20 years, but they've hit a plateau. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard for them to say, hey, look, I was good to get me to this point, and they were. But what worked to get to that point isn't necessarily what's going to work to get them to the next point. And there's a really great example of this. In fact, just this week, I read an article by the guy who started PagerDuty, a guy named Alex Solomon. And I don't know Alex. I've run into PagerDuty in my experience in the tech world. But he wrote an article, and it was published in Inc. magazine this week. Short article about how he replaced himself as CEO. I don't know too many CEOs who'd have the guts to say, you know what, me being in the top job at this company is actually keeping us from being able to achieve the objectives that.
Was he the founder as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gosh,
Even more.
Even more. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my deconstruction of that story, right, was that he exhibited three key traits of a leader who. Three key traits of a leader. One is humility. The second one is intention. And the third one was exploration. And I unpacked that a little bit in a post that I put up this week. But, the reality is that with a posture of humility, he was able to say, hey, you know what? I recognize that I'm not the best person for this, partly because he didn't want it. Like, according to the article, he's kind of like saying, I want to work on the technical stuff. And similar to what I was saying at the start, like he'd built this really successful business used by companies that, you could list off the names and people would be like, oh yeah, I know that company. Right. So, I mean, he did it, and then, the interesting thing about that story was that it's 3 years since he made the transition. And so you get to look back and say, did it work? Right.
Yeah.
And if you read the article, you'll find out, kind of.
Yeah, where do you find the article that you wrote?
I can get you the link to it. I have I did a post on my blog that links to it as well.
Cool.
But
we'll add it to the show notes. You were talking a while ago, and I think if I could kind of restate what I think I heard, Adam asked you a question, and when I was thinking, like, do you hire a coach at when everything is lost, all is lost, the ship is on fire kind of thing, and then preventative maintenance is kind of the way that my mind was thinking about it. And you said you actually get a lot more out of the preventative maintenance approach. So I bet that there are people listening to this who have been networking, business owners that have met coaches and consultants and just never even thought, like, why would I even talk to them?
Yeah.
It's probably the antithesis of what that first guy, like it's probably the opposite of humility a little bit. I don't want to offend anybody, but that's probably what it is. So if you could just talk directly to somebody that has maybe been on the fence or never even considered employing the services of a coach, like what do you think are the top things that they're going to get out of that?
Well, I think some of the things that we've already talked about, sort of perspective, helping you sort of, I refer to it as being an external brain.
Yeah.
Right. It's somebody that's outside your head. It's outside the noise to help you.
Or maybe outside your friends and family. Can I just do a quick confession? Right. Because like my wife will often give me very sound business advice, and she's right. But there's some kind of mental block. I'm sorry, honey. When she talks, like I want to hear it from somebody else. This upsets her. So I'm sure she's going to listen to this and be like, yeah, I know. She'll probably do her good to know that I know. But she'll give me perfectly good advice, and then like I'll read it in a book, and I'll be like, I was thinking about doing this thing, and she's like, oh, thanks for listening.
Said everyone, everywhere.
Oh, it's not just me? Okay, good.
My wife probably won't listen to this, so probably won't tell her. No, like I think there are some elements of friends and family that they know you better than anybody else, right? And so they can they have a particular lens that they can share, and you hear it. Like people have to hear things over and over and over again,
right?
A lot of times in order. Like I wish I was smart enough to be like, oh, Joe, you just told me that. I definitely need to do that.
Yeah,
but I'm not. And I'm not humble enough.
There's
a lot
a big
of times,
difference between
right?
listening and hearing. And the older I get, the more I realize that. Like
Yes.
I can hear the same thing over and over again, but until I hear it, then it's like, oh wow, like it clicks. I don't know exactly what that phenomenon is in your brain. I'm sure there's a way to describe it chemically.
Yeah. There's the science of it, and then there's the communication. So there's a lot of communication theory, and one of the things I talk about regularly It wasn't in the talk that you heard me give, but I have another one that I do, and I talk specifically about our ability to hear and listen. If in sort of the short version of that, there's lots of things that get in the way of our ability to actually listen. So hearing and listening, people get the order all mixed up. People want to be heard. They say, hey, I want to be heard. But the reality is they want to be listened to. And so hearing is an auditory construct. It's the thing that happens when sound waves hit your ear. And if you ever forget the order, if you just take the H off of here, you get your ear, and that's what's in between you and the ability to listen. So hearing happens first.
Right.
Then the cognitive process of listening kicks in. And there's lots and lots of reasons why we can't actually listen. Sometimes we're not present. Sometimes we have a screen, a frame of reference that gets in the way. Sometimes it's our personality. There's a ton to talk about there.
We're formulating our much more interesting retort to your conversation while you're talking. Like,
Yeah,
hurry up and
right?
get done talking so I can say my thing.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon we call loading while listening.
Yeah, that's me 95% of the time.
That's most people. Yeah, for sure. So that your original question was, so like, when is coaching going to be really helpful?
Right.
And the answer is, all the time.
Right.
I mean,
Well, what about in the stage of a business? Like, is there a phase in business where coaching is more like, so I was side hustle for like the last 9 years with my company.
Right.
And then I've gone full time and it's been like 7 months.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I'm at. Some people are 2 years in, 3 years in, 5 years in. Is there a spot where coaching makes them like, you're like, oh, I just wish I could get people to sign up during this point?
Yeah. And the answer to that is no.
No.
It's all the time.
It's all the time.
And here's the thing, right? We're humans and we take our brain with us through all the stages of company growth, right? It's not like, oh, I have this kind of unique problem and coaching is only for that kind of unique problem and it happens here in a company life cycle. Right. The challenges that we run into are constant and they are different. They're ever changing and they're different for each business, right? Yeah. So you're in business to do something. You're likely not in business to do the same thing as everybody else. So there's something unique and different about the value that you're trying to bring to the market through your business. So guess what? Nobody's ever done it that way before. What if it doesn't work? How do I know it's working? How do I know it's not working? Who do I talk to about it? Right? So here's the reason that I say that it's for the entire life cycle of the company. If you look at the statistics, and the most recent ones are pretty old. They're from 2016, from the Small Business Administration and the federal government census on businesses. The 30% of businesses die in the first 2 years. 50% of them die in 5 years, and only 30% of them are left after 10 years. So if you correlate that with the data from Gallup about employee engagement, which happens to founders as well, not just to the people that you have on your payroll, assuming you have people on your payroll. The U.S. leads the world with 30% engagement. So that means 1 out of 3 people in a company are engaged. So there's 3 of us in here.
So
which one of us isn't engaged? Right?
It's me.
So you run a company, you got 250 employees. Or 300, because I'm better at math that way. 100 of them are paying attention when they come to work.
Are fully paying attention.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And are like, they're pushing the company forward. Now, that doesn't mean that the other 2/3 are not there. It just means they're not fully engaged.
Right.
Right. So if you ask yourself the question, what is this business for? And who do I have available to help me get there? And how do I keep it from not dying? It's not fear-mongering on the death of your company. But if you had, let's say you have $1,000 to invest, and I tell you that at the end of the year, you're going to have 300 of that left. Does that sound like a good thing for you?
Sounds.
Depends. What do I get to do with the other money I spend?
It's poof, gone.
It's gone? Oh, yeah. No, it's not a good thing.
Right? So when we talk about company you talk about company death in sort of the statistics that are available, but the reality is that we're trying to help our companies thrive. and we need our company to thrive at the very earliest stages, because that's how we gain market acceptance. That's how we gain visibility, right? But then as we start to grow, there are pressures that can come to bear on our company as we hire our first person, or we hire a whole new team, or we hire a strategic, like, hey, I need to hire a CEO to replace me, as we were talking about with Alex's example, right? So all through the life cycle of the company, there are opportunities for the company to either make decisions, for the person running the company to make decisions that will either cause that company to thrive or cause it to sort of retract. And so the idea is that by having somebody who's outside of your brain and outside the organization, you can say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Why do you want to do that?
Yeah.
What could go wrong if you do that? Well, I haven't thought about what could go wrong because I'm so busy and like, this is the thing I got to go do.
Right.
And so the point there is what we're trying to do is bring all of the resources. If I told you, hey, there's a tool that you could use so that at the end of the year, you might have $500 instead of $300. Like, would you take it? You'd be crazy not to, right? So the point here is like, how do we help business owners build something from where they are to where they want to be and help it thrive?
Yeah. So if you've never used the services of a coach before, just keeping it super practical, what does it look like? We sign up, we're say, man, I want you to coach me.
Yeah,
and then I show up at your office and like, what does it look like?
Yeah, it looks like a conversation.
Because right in my mind, I feel like it looks like going to see a psychologist.
Right.
Like, do I get to lay down?
Right. So I'll ask. I don't know if you're allowed to do this in a podcast, but I'm gonna.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. There's no rules.
That's awesome.
No rules in podcast world.
Okay. Well, you heard him say that, right?
Yeah.
All right. So how did it feel like when we met for coffee?
It felt like two guys just talking.
Yeah.
Yep. You ask me questions, I ask you questions.
Yeah. And if coaching felt like that, how would you think of it?
I guess that's what I would kind of expect. I just have never used the services of a coach before.
Well, a lot of people have this misconception that the coach is supposed to have all the answers and to give you the plan. And what we see in the growth of coaching over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, it has been, people are trying to find an edge for themselves. Hey, I have the 6-week coaching course and I have the 12-week coaching program for you around this specific thing. And those are good things and they're helpful things, but sort of coaching in its most pure form is not what agenda I have as a coach.
Yeah. It's
really hearing from you where you're at, where you're stuck, and what do we need to do next with you. So sure, I bring tools and a framework and experience as a coach,
right?
And as a consultant, and I bring those things to the table to your benefit. But at the end of the day, I want to hear from you, and I want to ask you difficult questions that are designed not to make you feel bad, but to make you think deeper about what it is that you want and where you're stuck and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
And so in that way, a lot of times the best kind of coaching is just that sort of informal conversation, and it feels really fresh. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm really been looking forward to talking to you. I have this idea and I wanted to see what you thought. Well,
so for most people sitting back, they maybe have started a business, but it's not where they want to be. I think my wife right now, she told me I could talk about her, so I have permission. She started a daycare at our home, and she's incredible at what she does. I could not do what she is doing, but she probably needs somebody like you. I'm probably in the cheerleader phase where I'm just rooting her on, but I don't really have the.
You could help her grow her business. You could have more kids.
Right. I'm
you would have to pay her for that, though.
What do you say to most people that say, all right, well, I'm not where I need to be, but there's no way I could hire a coach right now. Obviously, if I don't have the money to, I'm sure you get asked that question all the time. What's your go-to answer? I'm sure people ask for guarantees or, different things like that, stats. What do you do besides just offer them referrals from people that you've worked with in the past? What's your answer with that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of questions embedded in the question.
Okay.
One of them is a story about money. and like, oh, it's really expensive. I don't have the money. Like, if I asked you how much you spend on coffee each week, or I asked you how much you spend on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all the other ways that you get your movies, we don't think a whole lot about investing our money in things that we want for ourselves. Like, I don't know what the average American car payment is, but I'm pretty sure it's not cheap. And so, we spend money on what's important to us. And so the question is, how important is your business to you? How important is your business to your future? And how are you investing in that? So where are you making it a priority to put your money? And then the question about like what's the guarantee? Well, I don't know what you're going to do based on what we talk about. Like that's up to you, right? And so as a coach, my job is, one part cheerleader, to celebrate, to notice, to observe, to say, hey, that's fantastic that you were able to succeed in that thing. One part is, it's not therapist, for sure, but it's, it's supporter, it's counselor. It's like, hey, that bad thing happened. Okay, well, let's, what did you learn from that? And what are you going to do differently? But the key thing is that you're going to do something. So what I offer is sort of the independent voice to be able to kind of help you think through. My wife, since we're talking about our wives here, she's a huge fan of me having a coach, because she's like, finally, somebody else you can talk to.
I feel like that would be my wife's exact reaction. Right. Thank God.
And I think, if I didn't have sort of, coaches do this reciprocal coaching thing, so we kind of
barter.
That's nice.
Well, sort of not bartering, because you got to talk to your accountant about what that means. But but the general idea of like, hey, I've been talking to you, listen to you thrash over and over and over again. To your point, Joe, like, why aren't you listening to me? Maybe you'll listen to somebody else. I think if I didn't have a network of people that I sort of collaborate with that way, she'd be ready to write the check. Because the question is, like, what is it worth to you to have the expertise and the objectivity of somebody outside that normal sphere of influence and sphere of conversations, who maybe has seen this before and knows how to help?
Do you find too, and I'm just wondering out loud now, if I'm giving you money, I'm not creating a posture where I'm a little bit more humble and receptive. Like, I'm asking for it. It's kind of like accountability versus like if I ask Adam, hey, if you see me eating like 3 cheeseburgers a day, can you tell me to knock it off because I'm trying not to be fat? Versus him just bringing up of his own accord, like, hey, I noticed that's your 3rd cheeseburger, fatty. It would feel a lot different if I ask him.
Right.
And I wonder if that doesn't, I bet it would for me, I guess is what I'm saying. If I engaged the services of a coach and paid, I bet I would.
More skin in the game.
I would have more skin in the game. I would give more thoughtfulness and intention to the advice that I'm receiving, I think.
It's like playing free poker versus having a little bit of money in it. You'll go all in with nothing, playing for poker chips. But if there's $1 or 2 in there, you're going to think a little bit more about it.
Well, you value what you pay for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I love this. I don't know the exact quote, but I know the gist of it from Gandhi, where he's talking about his definition of education, and he's talking about education is drawing out, where a lot of people think that education is putting in, and that's more like the educational system. But that's what keeps going through my mind when we're talking about coaching. It's just asking the right questions, helping draw out the information that's important to the person. And I wonder if that's not, we were talking before when we were having coffee about how I've read a lot of business books on business, etc. And there's a lot of formulas in there, which are more like what you're talking about, a consultant. So like consulting at its best, right? It's like, I ask you for this very specific thing. Here's the process that other people have done, and that's fantastic. But what I was chatting with you about is like, sometimes people give you the process that's like for their personality type. Like if you act and behave this way and think this way, you'll be successful, which might not work for me because I don't like acting and thinking and behaving like this person, because then I would feel like a fraud, etc. And so it sounds like the area of coaching that might be kind of one of its components of the secret sauce is that it helps you formulate by somebody asking you the right leading questions with the expertise and the experience of helping other people realize this about the right way to go about doing the business for you.
Yeah, I sort of getting back to your Gandhian educational quote. Seth Godin kind of amplifies that a little bit. And he talks about how the educational system is about collecting dots. So we acquire information,
right?
And the path to success now is not acquiring dots, but connecting them. And a lot of times our own frame of reference gets in the way of our ability to see connections between dots. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the value of coaching, is to help you see the connections when you can't see them yourself. And so we bring lots and lots of different tools to bear and say, hey, hey, if you need a business model canvas, but you don't necessarily know how to do it, well, what's it for, right? So, we kind of draw the connections between the dots so that you can start to see the bigger picture of what you're trying to use those systems for.
Right.
What's it cost to have a coach? You said there's no rules. So that just keeps coming through my mind. How do you charge?
Yeah, there are, sort of in the market, there are lots and lots of different, there's a whole range of people that, like I was talking to a guy the other day, he's like, I was kind of hoping I could pay like $30. And then there's other people that are like, $1,000 an hour for a seasoned executive business coach, and they go through their program. And some of those people say, hey, that's cool. I'll meet with you once a week or once a month for 6 months, and I only take six sessions. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pay $6,000 to meet with a person one time per month. Right.
I would be doing homework before I go to that. Like,
for sure. So, but that's, sort of, those are the outer limits. And then everybody's sort of in between somewhere. Right. And for me, I generally, I told you kind of before that I do this Coach-sulting thing. Mm-hmm. So one part coach and one part consultant. And because consultants can't ever get straight answers,
right?
It depends, right, in terms of my engagements, because somebody might need just coaching, and somebody might need a blend of coaching all the way up through fractional chief operating officer, right? So really, what I want to do for them is say, where are you, and in that company life cycle, and what do you need, and let's build a package of services around that that include coaching, but may not exclusively be coaching.
Gotcha.
So how kind of just backing up a little bit, what is it about Coach-sulting and what you get to do with your time every day that has you, I guess I'm getting to, like, what's the catalyst? What made you want to do this with your life?
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this, especially
because you
recently.
knew I was going to ask it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe, but I actually been pondering this. I was driving along the other day, coming back from a meeting, and thinking, like, what in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I
don't think a lot of, like, 5-year-olds, when they're like playing cowboys and Indians, are like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm gonna be a fireman. I'm gonna be a Coach-sultant.
Yeah. Right. I used to tell my kids all the time, like, I got 2 options at Halloween for scary costumes. Look at me standing here like this. It's consultant. No. So look, I thought back as early as I could remember. I kind of wanted to be like a policeman, and I remember growing up, my mom was always like after me, and especially when I got a car, I started to drive, and I'd be like driving down the road, and there'd be somebody on the side, and they got their car up on a jack. I'm like, oh, I gotta stop and help. Right. And she's like, you don't have to stop and help everybody. I'm like, well, yeah, Mom, but you're going to have to buy me one of those bag phones, because that was when bag phones were cool. So I can call the police and have them come and help. But otherwise, if I don't get the bag phone, I'm stopping and helping everybody on the side of the road.
Smart.
So, well, I wasn't as good a negotiator then as I am now, apparently, because I didn't get the bag phone. So, but the point there is, like, there's sort of this thread of helping people that has woven its way all through my experience. And, coaching and consulting are a way to come and engage deeply with a business owner over where they're trying to go and help them get there. Mm-hmm. And to do good in the world. Like, the business owner is they have a business for a reason, right? They're trying to bring a change into the world. They're trying to hire people and have productive jobs and do those kinds of things. And so So for a person who has a helper personality, coaching and consulting is a fantastic way to contribute to society and to earn a living by coming alongside somebody and just saying, hey, how can I help?
I was kind of wondering if that's what you were going to say, because a lot of the coaches and consultants that I met out at networking, when you have a conversation with them, I feel like when I leave those conversations, I'm more thinking about how to become better. Like I get a lot of thoughtful, really good questions that are like, oh, that's a really good, that I have to wrestle with. Like, it's not like, what do you want for breakfast kind of question, but it's like, well, let me ask you this. And here's this really thoughtful question. You're like, well, it might
Why do you want breakfast?
Yeah. Well, no, just kidding. What is it to be human? Yeah. Like, I think
just give you an existential crisis before 7 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of like who would be the worst consultant in the world. I think like David Carradine, like just the kung fu, like just rephrase the question differently to you every time. I would find.
I used to work at a coffee shop, and we'd have these BNI groups come in, and I would just overhear them. And some of the worst ideas for businesses I've ever heard have come from those. There's some great ones in there. Have there ever been clients where you're just like, I can't help you. You don't want to hurt their feelings, but you have to be honest with them and tell them that's not going to work.
So a couple of things. First, I'm a member of BNI Group, so I gotta make sure that in case anybody of BNI hears this, look, I mean, BNI is a great opportunity for BNI's purpose is not to help decide whether or not you got a good business or not. It's really a question of like, who do I know that I might be able to put you into touch with that could help you? Whether or not your business is good or valid or whatever, that's not for me to decide. It's a question of like, what do you need and who can I introduce you to? So that aside, there are situations in which, I will recuse myself from an opportunity. One of those is, there's just certain industries and certain spaces that are just not consistent with my core values. And so I have to say, hey, thanks, but I think you might be better off with this person because coaching in particular and even consulting is very much relational. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to have people who are sort of at philosophical odds with each other. That doesn't mean that I can't help people or work with people that hold positions that I don't agree with. And in fact, I've had clients like that before where it's like, hey, look, like as part of our decision to work together, hey, you should know that I view the world this way. It doesn't mean that I'm going to try to drive you that way, but if you were to find out about that and I know about you and the positions you take on the world, like I don't want you to be surprised by that. And so I don't think it has anything to do with the work that we're doing here. And if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. Let's move forward. And I find that people are pretty reasonable about that. But there are certain things where, clearly if it's illegal, we're going to say no.
Yeah. Now
right?
I want to know
how I'm going to.
Right.
I really need help growing my drug dealing business.
Some Breaking Bad.
Yeah. There's a difference between being in drug distribution legally and drug distribution not legally. And probably the former would be fine, but the latter not so much.
Gotcha.
So I did want to talk to you about what I think is a myth about coaching, and I want to hear your perspective on it. And I think I've heard it primarily in terms of like investing money. So like you hear like guys like, I'm not going to give any money to this guy working at Edward Jones if I know he doesn't have more money than me. Like I'm better at it than him. Why would I let somebody manage my money? Is that something that, this is what I think about. I think in coaching, like if you think about sports, like in basketball, there's no way that the head coach of the championship team is better player than the players on the team. But it's a different practice. Do you run into that with coaching? Like people are like, man, I'm not going to talk to this guy. I'm better than him.
Well, that would be an example of a person that I'd probably say, I'm not sure that I'm the best fit for you. Right? Because we talked about humility, right? And so if you find somebody who does exactly what you do, we call that a competitor.
Yeah.
Not a coach, right? So you don't want to be coached by your competitor. Although there are situations in which people may get together with their competition and, sort of raise the tide for all the boats, right? And so there's a legitimate path that way. But what I find is that if you have, as a coach, a posture of, I'd like to help you and I want to know where you're stuck and how we can help you move forward, a lot of that goes away. Like it's not. I don't know what the success measure is. That's like, hey, if you can't shoot a 4-point shot or half-court shot, like
you know much of sports than me because I don't think 4
I was
points
going
is
to
a real
ask
thing.
you who the championship team was, Joe.
Adam knows I know nothing about sports, and when I started talking about, he just looked at me like, "Go ahead, say something dumb."
I'm not I don't know if there actually is a 4-point shot. I know there's been discussion at some point.
I know that the women won the World Cup. That's pretty awesome.
That's good, Joe.
Yeah. I saw that.
Proud of you.
On vacation. I was in a different country.
Yeah, I had to
Everybody's
look up
watching
what
soccer.
ticker tape parade was.
Oh, yeah.
They kept talking about that. Still
You got to
don't know.
go back to the 40s.
Yeah.
They just throw paper out of windows. We call that littering.
Yeah, it used to be called ticker tape, but now it's littering. So they do it in New York all the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Did it
New
come
Year's
from
and
ticker
stuff.
tape? Is that like the thing
the
that would come off of the
communication. Yeah.
like for stock market numbers
Stocks.
and stuff?
Yeah.
Right. Well, let me ask you this: if anybody wants to get involved with a coach or a consultant, and they've been listening to this, and they're like, I need to at least explore this. What's a great way to get in contact with you and to start that conversation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, you can check out my website at getwiseinsights.com, and you can see a little bit about sort of how I think about things. Some blog stuff there, and there's a page on coaching for leaders. Obviously, phone call, carrier pigeon, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm happy to spend time exploring with anybody on sort of how coaching might be helpful to them in the context of what they're trying to do.
I'm also wondering if there aren't people who were listening to today's episode and thought, like, when you talked about just helping people and wanting to do good in the world, that kind of sounds like me. Like, what would you give somebody that's thinking maybe coaching is something I should look into? What's a good first step?
I'd say find a coach and talk to them.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, just like we were talking, right, that's the very beginning of the company life cycle.
Yeah.
Right. Is like, hey, I don't know something. How do I go find somebody who does know something? Right. There's plenty of books you can read. There's all kinds of things. But, like the chances are pretty good that if you go on LinkedIn and type coach, you're going to find at least a couple of people that are first or second connections to you that you could talk to.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
I know, was it everything you expected and more?
You just can't imagine.
Well, thank you. And thanks for filling in, Adam. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. I wish my voice sounded as cool as yours in this microphone.
Said to everyone ever.
Alas, it does not.
Buddy.
We love making this stuff for you. You can help us out by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Get unstuck, tell a better story, and have a good answer to the question, what are you doing today?